Come, step lightly. The stones remember footsteps older than our names. Imagine pulling a cloak about your shoulders as the light thins, the smell of dust and smoke, and something faintly sweet rising from a brazier. The path up to the observatory is a ribbon of compacted earth and scattered gravel, each step answering with a soft, familiar crunch. Above, the sky widens. You can feel it drawing your eyes. The observatory sits where it has always sat, not grand in the sense of marble columns and gilded roofs, but patient. A ring of carved steps, a narrow slit cut into a thick wall, a low platform where people have stood and listened to the sky. Up close, the stone is 1,000 shades of weather. Sun-warmed ochre, gray where moss has kept its cool, the pale chalk of lichen grown like tiny islands. When you press a palm to it, the stone is not cold the way new stone is. It holds the slow heat of long days and the faint salt of many seasons' rains. There is a comfort to that warmth, straightforward and old as bread. You are not here to be taught, not in any brusque way. You are here to be invited into a pattern, to settle, to note how small domestic habits travel with us, from kitchen to high place. We tug on cloaks, we cup warm drinks, we share the quiet between one hand and another. I will not insist on names for things the stone might have meant. That would be presumptuous. Instead, I will tell you what we do here, how we attend. Scholars suggest one purpose for such structures. Local stories offer another. Both are true in their way. One speaks to measurement, the other to remembering. Tonight, it is enough that you feel the stones beneath you and the sky above. We begin, as one does, with a small light. Lanterns are simple, tin and glass, wick threaded through oil, and when you set one down, the flame makes a private architecture of shadow. It leans and trembles with the air, a watchful thing. You take a mug of something brewed, bitter cocoa warmed with a scrap of cinnamon, or a herbal infusion whose steam threads upwards like a tune. The drink is handed to you by a keeper whose hands are small and steady. The knuckles are marked by the grooves of knotwork, the sort of lines that come from a life lived in the bright, open air. They tuck the mug into both your palms as if passing on both heat and company. The gesture is unremarkable in its tenderness, and it changes everything. There is a carved glyph near the main step, half worn away, the line of it softened by rain and the touch of many fingers. Some people say it marks an alignment. Others say it honors a season. We do not settle on a single explanation. We press fingers into the softened grooves and feel the history in relief. Small ridges, deliberate curves, a line interrupted where a chisel once caught and slipped. It is a domestic thing to take an object into one's palm and know it. A loaf, a spoon, a stone. Here you learn by touching. Night settles. The first stars bloom like embers in a hearth. At the edge of the plateau there is a thin rim of cloud, but the heart of the sky is clear. A band of the Milky Way stretches across, a soft, milky smear like flour tossed over a work surface. The keeper points with a finger that smells faintly of smoke and clay. There is no hurry. We wait for the moon to rise. Visit 1, the harvest night. On the night of the harvest moon, the stones hold their silver breath. The moon is almost full, so large it seems to be a second sun distilling a pale, generous light. The air is cool, but without sharpness, the sort of cool that invites shawls, not shivers. Around the observatory, the fields below have been cut back. There's a scent of straw and earth where bundles were left to dry. Children who are not here tonight will have their own beds. Tonight, our circle is small. The keeper, a couple of visitors who know how to stand quiet. And you. We begin by finding a place to sit. The steps are shallow and worn. They fit the curve of a person's body with a kind of kindness. You brush a little moss away with the heel of your hand, slide your cloak until it fans warm, and lower yourself with the care one applies to a new jar on a crowded shelf. The keeper brings out a small, flat stone. It is polished in the center from use, thumb-shaped, the size of a coin. This is a marker. We lay it where the moonlight will hit the step at a certain hour. It is an old, simple practice, not a rite to be performed with declaration, but a habit observed because it makes sense. You place your palm on the marker and let the cool of the stone balance the warmth of the drink in your other hand. We talk in low voices. The keeper offers a fragment from the stories told at the site. My mother said, they say, and the tone is musical, like pages turning, that when the moon rides the corridor, it tells where the planting begins. You know when to stir the pots, when to move the maize. It is a map that does not need ink. The line is short and offered as memory, not as a textbook fact. There is a hush that follows, not from awe alone, but from the recognition that these are tools of living. Scholars suggest that structures like this could have been used to mark seasons and guide agricultural activity. That phrase, gentle, scholarly, does not prune the story. It sits beside the keeper's memory like a well-placed dish at a table. Both ways of knowing human cycles are useful. The moon's path through the stone corridor is a measurement and a signal. For those making a living from the land, such signals are a practical poetry. The harvest night is patient with sound. A pair of foxes, perhaps, down in the scrub, articulates a small conversation, and a dog bark, distant and not urgent, folds into the dark. A low drumbeat may carry up from a village, a slow, metronomic heartbeat that reminds you of simple, shared time. A breeze plays small instruments on the stone, a thin rattling where grass meets wall, a whisper as if the stones themselves had breath. The lanterns at our feet offer small moons of their own, reflected in the glass of the keeper's eyes. As the moon shifts, the light moves along the carved notch, and for a moment, a long breath, the circle of our attention narrows to a thin, luminous corridor. It falls across a seam in the stone, lines up with a shallow pit on the platform, and in that alignment, some part of human curiosity sighs like a satisfied animal. There is no trumpet, no announcement. The moment arrives with the simplicity of a kettle coming to the boil. You feel, perhaps, the same small satisfaction you would have in setting a loaf in an oven and seeing it rise true. A simple offering is passed around, a small bundle of seeds tied with a strip of cloth. Someone presses it into your palm. It is not ritual so much as solidarity, tangible and plain. The seeds are not ancient relics. They are recent, from a harvest not yet carted in. They are a reminder of why people once needed such markers, to know when to sow, when to reap, when to store. You hold them for a moment, feeling their weight and their promise. There is a story about a night when the moon caught the corridor and hung there so long that a woman stayed until dawn to watch it. She set her hand on a particular stone, where her palm left a faint oil sheen that, locals say, can still be seen when the light strikes at a certain angle. She waited for the moon to tell her when to cut back the reed beds, the keeper says. They do not claim this as proof that the stones speak. They speak instead to the way human choices are tethered to sky. People plan by light. They time their meals and their seeds and their songs. That is the practical wonder here. As the harvest night stretches, we exchange small domestic tasks. A shawl is adjusted across a lap. Cocoa is topped up. Someone smiles and pats the stone with a palm, smoothing away a loose grain of dust as if straightening a tablecloth. These gestures are tiny anchors. They keep conversation gentle and make the act of watching feel like caring for an intimate room. I mention, as one might in passing, that some of the features on the wall, not all, but some, align with points on the horizon. Scholars have noted this at similar sites, and it is worth saying because it is helpful to think of the structure as both instrument and memory theater. Yet it is always wise to hold the scholars suggest within the same breath as the stories say. Archaeology can sketch likely functions. Oral memory dresses them in the colors of life. Neither is entire truth on its own. We sit until the moon pulls itself higher and then arcs away like a slow, pale ship. The markers cool. Conversation becomes more about small things, the texture of a woven cloak, the warmth that remains from holding a cup too long. There is an ease to it that feels like a familiar room. You could be in a kitchen where a pot is simmering, the same clock ticking in another corner of life. When at last we stand to leave, the keeper picks up the flat stone and tucks it back into a niche where it rests against other markers and little worn implements. There is a slight sound as it slides, a soft, dry click against older stone. We take our lanterns up the path. The air now has the clean, taut quality after a clear night, and you can hear your breath more crisply. The fields below the plateau are darker, flattened into shapes. The moon has gone pale, and the stars are the only lamps left, small and unassuming. If you have enjoyed sitting in the slow company of a single, careful night, and you would like more evenings such as this under different skies, follow our slow visits. There are more nights to come. We will not hurry. Visit 2. The Blustery Night. There is a different kind of arrival when the wind is in the mood to rearrange things. The path up to the observatory feels loaded with motion. Leaves skitter like small reminders, and a stray mat of grass will shift in a way that makes you adjust your step. You wrap your cloak tighter at the neck, a domestic action again, and the fabric gathers in familiar folds. The keepers at the site prefer wool on these nights. It carries the warmth and muffles the sharper edges of the air. Tonight the sky is a wash of moving cloud, not entirely sure where it wants to be. Bands of stars offer themselves briefly, then blink behind gauze. The wind runs its fingers along the stone, producing a thin, paper-like sound where it finds a gap in the carving. The observatory seems more alive in this weather, responsive and attentive, the way a person can bristle and smooth when the mood of a room changes. Standing on the platform, you can feel the wind negotiating with the stones, tugging at every loose scrap of cloth and testing the steadiness of lantern flames. We set the lanterns within the shelter of a shallow alcove. Their small flames make more than light. They provide a focal constancy when the sky refuses to be steady. You put your mug beneath your chin and blow on it to cool a surface blister. That is how the night asks for patience. Micro-tasks to hold attention while the stars play hide-and-seek. The keeper produces a carved marker, a thin wedge of stone with a notch cut across its rim. It is used for pointing, for steadying, for measuring the approach of a particular star against an imagined line. When the wind tosses your hair into your face, you laugh softly and tuck it back. More of a gesture between companions than anything ceremonial. There is a lesson in how we wait. We do not, that is, consider the absence of stars as failure. We learn to listen to everything that is present. The wind has sounds that are usually background. A scrape through reed beds, a rustle where a lizard moves under leaves. But here, all those whispers become part of the night's voice. Someone tightens the rope on a lantern, and the friction gives a brief, friendly rasp. A child from a nearby home, not here tonight, but remembered, once said that nights like this had the sky on the move, and the people must be the still point. That remark circulates among us like a comfortable joke. Listening, the keeper says, is part of watching. They stamp their foot lightly to set their feet, and the sound is small but decisive. The stone answers with a steady, muted thud that you feel more than hear. In the pause after that, the wind takes a breath and softens. For a handful of minutes, the sky allows a star to peek through. It is not the star we were waiting for. It is a small, white point to the east, and it appears with an unassuming politeness. The keeper points and traces its path with a finger that moves like a spoon in a pot. We watch its thin crawl. The movement is tiny but patient, and in that patience we are reassured. There are small tools here that carry the same intimacy as a hand-turned wooden whisk. A length of cord coiled on a peg. A smooth bone taken as a pointer. A folded scrap of papyrus with a simple sketch of the horizon as it looked some nights back. The keeper spreads that papyrus on their knee, and, by torchlight, traces a line with a finger like a seamstress checking a hem. This is not the kind of record that would make a professor clap. It is a personal ledger, where the cloud hung heavier last autumn, where the moon swept low. It is cozy knowledge, the sort you exchange with neighbors over a fence. At the same time, it has an economy to it. It helps you plan when to plant, when to mend, when to take in the harvest. Practical poetry again. The wind will sometimes deliver a spectacle of its own. It can toss up a swirl of dust from lower terraces, and for a moment the plateau is rimmed in a luminous haze, like the edge of a teapot at steam. The lanterns become soft moons behind gauze. Voices lean quiet. We speak at a volume that honors the street-level noises. On the platform, the keeper finds a heavy pebble and rolls it between thumb and forefinger, the motion steadying both stone and person. Tactile repetition calms. You rub your palms together, feeling the fabric of your gloves soften into your skin, and, in that small, private ritual, the room of the night grows nearer. Between clouds there are infrequent reveals. A constellation will push aside a curtain, then fold it back. The moment of revelation is always brief enough to feel like a gift. When the star we had hoped for finally shows, there is no rapture that distorts. Instead, the circle of watchers leans in a little. The keeper lets out a small, pleased sound, like one makes when bread comes out well. Not all nights are patient, they say, but the wind teaches us how to wait with grace. You imagine this night as an exercise in social poise. The sky will present or not, and the community practices the art of contentment either way. Patience here is not passive. It is active attention. Someone tightens the cord holding a lantern. Another reties a scarf. Two people compare the warmth of their gloves and exchange a knowing look. These actions are tiny concessions to comfort and fellowship. They are the human scale of astronomical labor. Not the calculations or instruments, but the small logistics that make staying out overnight feasible and humane. As the wind shifts from clever to blunt, you feel it in your chest as a kind of pressure. There is an urge to keep moving to stay warm. The keeper insists on a simple exercise. We get up and walk the circumference of the platform together, slow and measured, like people pacing a small room to exercise a stiffened limb. The motion scatters the wind's insistence and folds it into conversation. A line of stars watches us, patient and uncomplaining. We complete the circuit and return to our chosen step. Everyone settles again, slightly breathless, slightly eased. It is possible, on nights like this, to misread the experience as merely weather. Yet there is a subtle education in bluster. How transient our certainties are, how our tools and practices must be supple. In the observatory's context, that means that measurement cannot be only anchored in a mechanical way. It must also be attuned to temperament. We learn and relearn to attend in ways that honor both accuracy and humanity. You imagine a childhood memory, perhaps not yours, but a hypothetical child who once waited here when the sky could not decide. They would have learned a particular kind of resilience, how to hold a small candle of interest and let the wind rearrange the rest. The keeper smiles at the idea of such a child. They learn that sometimes the sky gives you a moment, the keeper says, and that is a beautiful way to describe a heavy night's lesson. We are, as ever, practical with our tools. A carved wedge is used again to steady the lantern while it is being trimmed. Someone crumbles a small piece of bread and offers it to the fire. The flame gulps and flares, then settles. The sound is quiet, pleasant. You might think of these actions as domestic. You would be right. Watching the sky asks for the same liturgical care as setting a table. It is humble and devoted work. And then the wind, as if tired of teasing, begins to flatten. The clouds break at odd angles. A band of stars opens. One slender one, much anticipated, brightens to the point where the keeper nudges the pointer and aligns it with the notch. A hush spreads, not theatrical, but intimate. The star tracks against the notch, slow as a thought, for a brief, held breath, measurement, and poetry match. A visible line, a human hand, and the night's answer. As that alignment gives itself, there's a sense of shared, small celebration. No shouting, no banners. Rather, hands meet and squeeze, a quick exchange of warmed palms. A pocket is produced with a folded sketch, a small inked representation of a constellation as aligned at another time. The keeper passes it to you. On the paper, the lines are simple and human. Circles for cardinal points, a wavering line for the horizon, a dot for the notch. It is, in its way, a recipe card for wonder. We plan, perhaps, to stay the night. There is an unspoken agreement to make the shelter comfortable. Someone fetches a thicker blanket and spreads it over a low wall, creating a nest. The lanterns are tucked under small chimneys of clay to guard their flames. The platform, with its steps and notches, feels very much like a living room with a view. The night is not finished. There are more clouds coming. We will keep listening. Here, at this moment, a sound in the distance draws the circle's attention. The long, measured knock of a piece of wood against stone. It could be a shepherd on the lower path, or an animal, or simply the wind playing tricks. It is not clarified. The keeper stands slowly and goes to the edge of the platform to peer into the dark where the path disappears. Their figure is slight against the sky, and for a moment they are more sentinel than anyone else. They return with a small, folded strip of cloth, damp with dew, which they press into the hands of someone who shivers. The exchange is wordless and exact. We move a little closer as the night thickens. The lanterns, now safer, send out an even domestic glow. In the shelter of this light, conversations deepen into memory. Not dramatic episodes, but small anecdotes. A father who taught another keeper how to identify the crescent moon with a certain herb. A neighbor who once mistook Venus for a house lamp and laughed until the whole village joined in. Such stories make the observatory less a relic and more a living space where practical learning and domestic life meet. There is time in the bluster to notice how the stone itself seems to be a repository of breath. In places where hands have lain often, the stone feels slightly warmed or smoothed, and you recognize in that the same kind of familiarity as the worn handle of a favorite pan. The keeper moves along the wall, letting the back of their hand skim over the carvings. The action is soft and reverent in a way that is not theatrical. It is akin to touching the back of a friend's neck in comfort. We settle again, but the narrative is not complete yet. The wind will return with renewed purpose. Clouds will cross and uncross. The star we watched will retreat, then offer itself anew. Our patience is renewed as we tend to small, homely needs and listen. There are more tasks to be done. The slight adjustment of a rope here, the retilting of a lantern there. These are the micro-rituals that stitch the night together, and so we stay. The platform is a small island of human attention in a moving world. The lanterns breathe, the keeper rearranges a cloak, and a small private conversation folds round a story. A story the keeper begins to tell about a night when the wind refused to leave and how a lantern, kept low and close, changed the whole mood. They speak in the voice of memory, and in that voice the night becomes a thread connecting one generation to another. The sky is still undecided. Clouds drift like slow shoals. A gust takes breath, and the lantern flames flare briefly, obliging us to shield them with cupped hands. The keeper adjusts the notch, testing whether the star's path has altered. You feel the tilt of expectation, gentle and patient, in the air around you. We are at a hinge of the evening. The wind will either settle and give us a clear window, or it will continue its game and make measurement a lesson in humility rather than revelation. We wait together, hands busy and minds soft, listening to the myriad tiny noises of the blustery night. We wait together, hands busy and minds soft, listening to the myriad tiny noises of the blustery night. The keeper shifts a shawl across their shoulders and hums a tune that seems older than anyone present. A simple cadence, more for the comfort of a throat than for the stars. The wind, perhaps tiring of its game, sighs and eases at last, and the clouds thin like breath drawn through fingers. A narrow corridor of ink blue opens, and in it the star we followed returns, clearer than before. The keeper inclines their head as if in polite greeting. We do the same. There is quiet applause in the way hands fold, and in the small private grin of someone who has been vindicated by patience. We do not linger in triumph. What we carry back from nights like this is less a trophy than a tune. The memory of standing attentive when the world decided to be unsettled. When we put out our lanterns later, the flames are steadier somehow, as though they have learned an extra lesson in endurance. We gather our few belongings, the coiled cord, the notch marker, the folded sketch, and tuck them into pockets and pouches. The keeper picks up the stone wedge, brushes a fleck of gravel from its face, and rests it against the wall where it will wait for the next gust. The path home feels different after a night of compromise. The air seems to have a new patience in it, and your cloak, damp at the hem, smells faintly of smoke and the sea of grasses below. We step from that night's weathered company toward a different sort of waiting, the kind that keeps a calendar in the mind. There is a season when watchers keep their eyes on a notch in the stone because 3 bright lights are due to arrive together. It is not prophecy. It is observation folded through pattern and remembered practice. The tale of that evening has been told in many versions, each softened by the teller's hands until it reads like a favorite recipe. We call it, without pomp, the night of alignment. There is an anticipatory hush in our group as we approach for the next visit. The platform greets us with its accustomed, patient contours. In the tray of the wall where the marker stones sit, one is rotated, as if it too is waiting for a particular angle. The keeper moves with a deliberate, almost domestic choreography. The lantern is wound, the wick trimmed with a small blunt blade that has known 1,000 nicks. The mug is filled and warmed by the brazier, and a cloth is smoothed over the lap. These gestures prepare not only the body, but the attention. You find yourself performing them more carefully than you might elsewhere, as if each smoothing is a way to steady the mind. Visit 3. The perfect alignment. On the night that deserves the slowest breath, the air is held in something like reverence. The temperature is even. The sky is clean and confident. The horizon is a fine, unbroken line. Those who have come tonight move with a purposeful hush. There are more people, some who have traveled a little, others who were born within a day's walk. They come with small gifts, a stitched pouch of dried herbs, a pressed sprig of a local plant, an inked scrap that sketches last season's horizon. Nothing dramatic, nothing grand. Each offering is a domestic token, like a slice of cake brought to a neighbor when the oven has been kind. The watch is set. A careful arrangement of stones marks positions for observers, comfortable, human-scaled seats. The keeper produces an instrument of modesty, not a telescope as a modern mind might picture, but a simple sighting device. A length of straight wood with a groove carved along its face and a small aperture at one end. It is used to narrow the eye, to make a picture of line and point. They rest it on the lip of the wall and steady it with practiced hands. Such an implement does not speak in numbers. It speaks in the slow act of pointing. You look through the notch, and the sky resolves into a map of possibilities. There is chatter at first, soft and respectful, about weather predictions and where last year's alignment fell. Then, as twilight slides into a star firmament, the talk dissolves into a single, mutual attention. Everyone knows that some evenings will offer nothing but the pleasure of being together. Some will present a brief gift. Tonight feels like a thinly wrapped present. A hush spreads around like linen over a table. You feel your heart keeping a companionable rhythm with other chests. Scholars suggest that architectural features at sites like this could have been oriented to capture moments of celestial coincidence. The crossing of planets, the passage of a bright star, the rising of the sun or moon at particular points on the horizon. The language of could have is important. It keeps the story honest. At the same time, the local stories, those worn human narratives, add texture. They said once, the keeper murmurs, voice a small bell, that 3 lights met the notch, and it was like the sky had chosen to nod. The phrase is tenderly said and framed clearly as a story held by people rather than a scientific ledger. The build towards the alignment is a study in small attentions. Eyes adjust, lids lower, then raise. A hand lifts to shade a flicker of glass. Someone bites off the corner of a biscuit with a measured, private pleasure. You listen to the small soundscape, the rustle of cloak, the soft scrape as someone settles, the tiny metallic ring when a cup touches stone. All these domestic noises cradle the larger wonder. It is a reminder that human observation always comes wrapped in human life. When the moment arrives, it is not cinematic. There are no trumpets nor a sudden illumination across faces. Instead, it is a patient lining up of light. A planet known for its steady, warm glow edges into the notch. Another, more hesitant, flickers and finds its place. A third point, smaller but bright, slips like a bead on a string into the groove. For a few long seconds, 3 points connect across the aperture. A simple, clean geometry. Star, notch, stone. For those watching, breath is the only punctuation. There is an almost imperceptible release, a communal exhale, as if a held note finally resolves. You sense something align in your chest as well. Not certainty, not magic, rather the quiet satisfaction of seeing a pattern come true. The keeper does not make speeches. Instead, they rest their hand on the wall where an older palm mark has faintly greased the stone and say only, "We measure so we can remember the measure." The line acts both as explanation and benediction. In the following silence, someone offers a handful of roasted seeds. Another offers a scrap of honeyed bread. The food passes without ceremony, a chain of small warmths, fingers touching fingers for a beat, a smile that is near to a blessing. The shared act of eating makes the astronomical moment domestic. It brings the sky down to table level. In that alignment, eyes trace the meeting point again and again. Some people sketch it in the margins of a notebook, careful, uncluttered lines that will be folded and kept like recipes. Others simply let the image sit in their minds. The keeper takes a small chalk and makes a faint mark on a ledger, no more than a tally, and tucks it away. This markedness is less about stamping ownership than about keeping a human thread through time. The ledger will be read by another hand, in another season, and the mark will say, "We were here, and this is what we noted." A memory is offered, brief and soft. "Once," says the keeper, "a woman came carrying a lamp that her mother had carried before. She watched the 3 lights and wept, not because the sky had done anything to her, but because she understood at that moment that her mother had stood under the same point and made a different kind of plan. She planted for children she would never know. The sky was a witness to decisions, not just movements." The story sits with us like a warm cloth. People nod in the way one acknowledges a well-made soup, a small, wholehearted approval. There is a technical clarity to the watch as well. Measures taken, positions noted. But the language used among us is never triumphalist. We speak of trying to see rather than we must prove. We keep our facts soft-edged. This line seems to match, or in similar places we've seen. Arts. The keeper points out a horizon notch where the sun might rise on a particular day of the year, and adds, without the weight of dogma, that such alignments would have been useful for scheduling communal labor, for marking communal festivals, for knowing when to store grain. The practical side and the poetic side live in the same sentence. As the planetary trinity lingers, the air develops a thin, celebratory electricity. Again domestic, again low-key. Someone clamps a lid on a pot, and the tiny hiss as steam meets cold metal seems disproportionately festive. People lean in to warm their hands, to pass on heat. Fingers press briefly to the sides of mugs. A shawl is folded and offered. In the domestic exchange, the astronomical becomes human. We remember that the point of measurement is not merely the count of objects in the sky, but the life arranged around that count. When the alignment slowly loosens and the lights move past their appointed meeting, the sense of completion feels gentle. The keeper replaces the sighting device with a practiced care and lowers their eyes, as if to resume a conversation paused. Our group resettles into the ease of the platform. Someone hums the same tune the keeper had earlier. It is a way of folding the night back into memory. The sketch, the seeds, the ledger, all are tucked away. We do not rush our departure. There is a communal patience as people fill lanterns and fold cloaks, as if to linger in the domestic afterglow as long as the night allows. On the walk back from that perfect alignment, the horizon is a black ribbon, and the path a slow seam. Conversation is subdued, but none of it is lessening. Rather, it is the comfortable talk of neighbors leaving a good, long meal. You smell the faint tang of peat smoke from distant hearths and the lingering sweetness of roasted grain. The keeper walks with you for a while, sharing a detail about a marker you had not noticed. The way a particular glyph curls like a hand, a small flourish that delights them without grand pronouncement. Such delights are currency among people who keep watch. After an alignment like that, there is often a lull of expectation in which stories find space to breathe. Our group disperses with an unspoken agreement not to fill that lull with analysis, but to let it be a soft enclosure for memory. We fold ourselves into beds or into the shelter of temporary nests on the platform if the night is mild, and our bones prefer a prolongation. The memory of 3 lights meeting a notch will be carried home stitched into pockets, hummed into oaten breads, drawn into the margins of mother's notes. It will settle into a comfortable fact, something we saw together. The visits can vary and the seasons change. There is a night I remember well, mist soft, more like a memory than a place, where the sky seemed to press close and the stones read like pages of an old book. This will be the last of our 4 clean nights, a fog-hushed visitation where story and imagination do more work than sight. It is perhaps the one night most inclined to invention, if by invention we mean the act of fitting narrative to the places left unlit by failing visibility. We take care here, both out of respect and out of honesty, to call these moments stories rather than revelations. Visit 4. The Foggy Night. On that evening, the world is a softened photograph. The plateau is wrapped in a gauze that colors sound as well as sight. Distant noises are dulled and round. The stones underfoot feel different, close, intimate, as if they have been summoned to the side of the path like old friends. You move with a slightly altered attention, head lowered sometimes to watch your step on the slick edges of worn treads, sometimes raised to catch the suggestion of shapes where the horizon should declare itself. The lantern light does not carry as far. Instead, it pools at our feet like private lakes. Because the sky is veiled, our tools change. Rather than looking for exact lines, we turn to the textures of storytelling. We trade small recollections. A keeper who has waited many years says, in a voice that avoids claiming anything more than memory, that on nights like this people are apt to recall the women who sewed moon songs into their shawls, or the man who learned to read the weather from the smell of the stones. These accounts are not museum pieces. They are living, breathing fragments. They are told and retold, adjusted in the mouth to fit new listeners. We sit closer than we might when the stars are clear. The fog asks for proximity, physical warmth, but also the warm press of stories. Someone produces a small box of charcoal and a flat, soft stick of bone used to sketch in soot. Faces are rendered quickly in broad strokes, laughing lines and the uplift of eyes. The sketches are rough and affectionate, reminders rather than portraits. A child who is present tonight, a child, yes, though most of our gatherings tend toward the adult, turns those quick sketches into a game of identifying which face belongs to which tale. It is a humanizing humor that keeps the night gentle. In the fog, the observatory's stones themselves seem to have softened into memory. Carvings appear half-formed, like phrases heard in the wrong light, and you find yourself filling them in with things you have heard, or with things you would like to remember. It is tempting, in such a velveted atmosphere, to attribute motive and voice to the place, to say that a certain groove was made by a particular hand, to imagine the exact words spoken. We resist absolute claims, and instead say, "Some say," or "a story goes that." That breathing space keeps the line between history and imagination clear but hospitable. A keeper tells one of those abbreviated tales, a story handed down in fragments. Once there was a watcher who would come on nights of thick mist, because, they said, the clouds were kinder listeners than the open sky. When the watcher could not see the stars, they spoke to the stones instead, and received an answer in the warmth left where their palm had lain. The keeper laughs a little at the memory, not to dismiss it, but to invite it into the circle. It is not proof, they add, but it is a way of keeping company with the past. That phrasing, company with the past, feels like a moral and a comfort in one breath. In those softened hours, our imaginations are granted room to breathe. You might imagine the distant terraces filled with lantern-lit figures working late, the smoke of cooking fires melting into the fog. You might picture a child from another century walking the same steps and pausing at the same worn join to peer into the murk. Such images are not posed as empirical statements. They are offered as ways to inhabit the place across time. They are the human response to absence. Rather than seeing less and resigning to emptiness, we tell more stories to fill the space. Small domestic gestures anchor these flights of fancy. Someone brings out a small bowl of warm stew, the steam rising like a tiny cloud that mingles with the mist. The aroma is simple. Grain, a root, a little herb. No one claims it to be an ancient recipe. Indeed, it is likely recent. But the act of sharing makes the foggy night feel like a communal kitchen. A shawl is offered and accepted. Palms meet, fingers press for a moment. There are, in all these gestures, the same sorts of care one would bring to a bedside or a table. The fog invites tenderness. The night encourages a certain confessional tone. With visibility so limited, people feel freer to share private, quiet things. A man whispers about a time he planted a tree and named it after his sister. A woman, eyes softened by lantern glow, speaks of wrapping a child in the same cloth her grandmother once used. These are small stories of constancy, what one might call the human archive. They are not grand narratives, but they build a belonging that is steady and intimate. The keeper listens with that old, attentive face that seems to gather and save such little admissions. There is also an element of play, of making patterns where none can be seen. Someone makes shadow figures against a nearby wall, the lantern casting exaggerated hands that perform the simplest dramas. Laughter spills, contained and comforting. A song arises, hesitant at first, then fuller, the kind of tune that needs no exact lyrics, only rhythm. In the thick air, the melody seems to come from everywhere at once. The fog turns our voices into a communal blanket. This evening, the keeper reaches into their pocket and brings out an old scrap of cloth folded many times, its edges frayed. They unfold it with the care one gives to a relic. On it is drawn, no, not drawn precisely, but suggested, a star with a ring around it. We find ways to make marks, the keeper says. Even if the sky won't oblige, we can keep our records like a mother keeps stitches. The scrap is passed around, and people press it like a talisman, not for magic, but for connection. The action is gentle, human, and honest in its modesty. The mist makes faces less precise and more forgiving. A quarrel would feel dumb here. Perhaps that is why stories turn soft. We tell of a night years ago when an argument was lost in fog. Two men had been disputing the line of a furrow, and when visibility cleared, they discovered they'd mended fences greater than the one between them. A new path of seeds and saplings. The moral is less stern than it reads. In the fog were born new agreements, and perhaps that is the lesson we take for ourselves. Mystery does not require being feared. It can be fertile. As the hours pass, the fog thins and the world regains its edges. The observatory's carvings come back into sharpness, the horizon reasserts itself, and the stones resume their unambiguous presence. People stretch and shake out the stiffness that comes from sitting too long. The keeper folds the scrap cloth, tucks it away, and offers a short, bright remark. Not all nights teach you how to see. Some teach you how to tell. The line is an elegant summation. When sight fails, narrative fills the gap. We gather our things and walk the path back. The dampness in the air smells green and soft. On the way down, someone pauses and scoops up a small handful of the soil, holding it to their face. They breathe in the scent of rain that has not yet fallen and say, almost as a prayer, "Keep this." The keeper nods. It is a small, human transaction, an exchange that recognizes the continuity of care between hands and earth. Coda, dawn, and leave-taking. From these 4 nights, the harvest silvered by moonlight, the wind-tossed lesson in patience, the precise joy of perfect alignment, and the misty realm of story, there comes a joined memory that feels more like a garment than like a list. You fold it around yourself as you step away from the stones. The observatory will wait. Stones, having no urgency, are patient caretakers. They will warm again under sun and cool under 1,000 nights. People will return with new drinks and new songs. We do the mundane thing of making a small fire before leaving on one occasion. Not to mark a ritual, but because the path is bleak with cold, and because hands prefer the company of something that burns. Around that fire we speak softly, not to perform but to inhabit our tired, contented bodies. Someone blows on the embers, and a small flare rises. The sound is like a single note in a familiar hymn. The keeper wraps a cloak around a visitor's shoulders with the tacit, practiced affection of a person who knows exactly where a fabric must sit to catch warmth. There is no spectacle to this farewell, only the human economy of kindness. As dawn approaches on one of these nights, the horizon takes on a tentative color, a pale smear that says day is near. The sky is no longer the great mystery, but a neighbor moving into view. You stand for a long moment on the last step, and the stones are cool beneath your palm. You feel the day's first light catch on some glyph and reveal the shallow oil sheen where decades of palms have rested. The keeper, with their hand still in yours for a second, says, "Take it with you." The calm. We make it here between stars and stories, and you can carry it like a coin in your pocket. The tone is simple, practical, and oddly sacramental. Before we part, there is, as agreed at the start of our company, a small signpost for those who have wanted to follow these slow visits. If you have liked this evening's measured company and would like more nights under different skies, you may follow our slow journeys. There are more to come, and we will not hurry. The request is gentle and quiet, offered as a neighbor might offer to share bread. Our footsteps recede down the path. The platform becomes a memory of warmth and its own soft architecture. Behind you, the keeper and the stones remain, a patient, unadvertising presence. And ahead, the world resumes the familiar tasks of morning. You carry with you the taste of cocoa or stew that comforted your fingers, the warmth of a hand passed for a moment, the melody hummed under breath. More than anything, you take away a manner of attending, the humble practice of looking up at intervals, and of arranging one's life by curious checks and gentle measures. If, after this, you would like to learn more about how structures such as this have been studied, or to find accessible resources about archaeoastronomy and the peoples who watched these skies, there are links in the description that gather cautious scholarship and respectful introductions. They are offered to help you read further, quietly and without fanfare. Go now with a quiet heart. Lay yourself down, knowing that the night's measures are not commandments but invitations. To notice, to tend, and to join the unhurried company of those who have long kept watch. When you next draw a cloak about your shoulders and light a small lantern, remember the stones, how they kept their heat, how they remembered hands, and let the sky be, for you, a generous companion as you sleep.